Welcome, everybody. Hello. Thank you so much for coming. It's really good to see so many people here this evening. I'm Sarah. I'm a member of the church here at Emmanuel. I hope you're going to have a lovely evening tonight and that you've all had a drink and a sweet treat. Some of you might be here thinking science and God don't really go together, but I think Ben's going to do a really good job at showing that actually they're not necessarily mutually exclusive and they go very well together. Just a few boring things to add as well. Obvious things like fire exits, we've got the doors at the back and here, and just make your way out onto the street. Toilets are through the double doors, through the foyer that you've just been in, and in the back left here as well. Unfortunately, the disabled toilet is out of order at the moment. We do have one on the first floor. If you do need that, then we can make that available for you. So that's enough of the boring stuff. Welcome, and I'll hand you over to Ben.
And also, there's no way that I can sufficiently communicate my enthusiasm for the ideas of the Christian faith. Now, I apologise. I hope this won't be a miss-sell. Tonight's mainly going to be about science and arguments of design within nature, and I'm not going to have time to do a proper presentation of why the Christian faith is so important to me, although I think the Bible is a powerful narrative and gels very well with it. So if you would like more of that, you need to come to church again, or ask particularly for an apologetics talk on that theme. It's well worth it, but as I say, tonight I'm going to be quite focused and also really broad. And as I say, for me, because science is something I do for a living and my Christian faith is something that I've had for very, very many years, I want those to gel. I want a coherent worldview. I want things to make sense. I don't want separate boxes for ideas that are so big and so powerful. So we'll see how we get on. Let's go. Very briefly, so I have a physics degree and I've been teaching science for 30 years, and as I say, been a Christian since basically I can remember thinking about things. This means I don't have a degree in biochemistry, cosmology, astrophysics, design engineering, and mathematics, philosophy, and we're going to look at little bits of all of that. So in the Q&A, try not to be too brutal, okay? Like seriously, like don't ask me for any equations that are not on the PowerPoint. I might not have them to hand. And obviously, I'm stealing the work of a load of other people, right? I'm just going to show you lots of things and hope that they're of value to you. As always in science, the idea is that you weigh evidence on its own merits. Don't take my word for it, although I will try to persuade you. I just put that out there. It's what I'm here for. And if I can encourage you to dig deeper into this, I think it would be of profound worth. If you're someone who already has a faith, I hope to bolster it or help you bolster it. And if you don't have any kind of faith, I hope to point to you that God is a very rational explanation for the wonders in this universe. So just as a starter, you might not be able to see them very well. They're quite small, but I brought a few bits and bobs with me tonight. You can maybe see them on the table. I'll maybe lift a few things up. There's that. Even my physics colleague didn't know what that was. Yeah, you probably might know what that is. Again, if you're a bit of a nerd, you might have some semblance of a guess at that. And then here's the easy one, some little cubes made out of different things. And so I just want you to have a brief think about how those things might be like they are. And then, harder question, why are they here tonight? I mean, maybe that's an easy question. Okay. But could you give like cast iron proof for either of your theories? And would complete proof be possible for your theories? Well, let's talk about what your theories might have been. So you might not have proof for what you thought, but I reckon you might have thought some things like this. Some of the materials look like they're man-made. This, for example, is plastic, and that's refined metal, probably iron. And then, I mean, look at the shape of that. That's quite specific, regardless of what it actually is or whatever it does. And this you recognised, and it's full of man-made material, plastic. So fair enough. You probably figured that out. And all of them have shaping that looks deliberate. Like, you could propose, I guess, that these things could have just come to be like a crystal inside some rock or something. That's vaguely plausible, but this is not something you would find in an empty planet where there was no life. I would hesitate to, I would hazard a guess, I would suggest. And if you went to Mars, where we don't think there are humans currently living, and you found this on the surface, you'd probably be like, wow. And what about this? This is a graphics card for a computer. It's got an NVIDIA chip inside with 5 billion transistors that it creates, constructed so that it can make nice images like that, but move really quickly. It's a very unusual thing, right? It's a made thing. Let's move on. If you see something that has moving parts, this has got suspension and everything. It's really cool, and it's got a V4 engine and a gearbox and everything, but it's got moving parts, right? And it's got things that work in coordination with other things. And the more of those sorts of features you get, the more likely you are to make this thing we call an inference to the best explanation, which is it's probably designed. And you can look at it in a couple of ways. One is, how do the parts actually work? What mechanisms are there? And you can also look at it in terms of the intention of whoever made it. And there can be layers of that. I mean, presumably the Lego company want to make profit, but the way they do it is to make nice toys for children and grown-ups. And so it's a normal thing as a human to look at the works of other humans and say, you know what, I see that this is designed, this is the reason for it, this is how it works, obviously. So we're very good at doing this because I've done this slide, I'm going to zoom on, but the top point is useful. The human designers we can recognize because we know that we can do it too, and we've seen other people do it, and so that it doesn't need any further explanation. You look at a chair and you know what it does and you know what it's for. It's dead easy, right? But what I'm obviously going to go on to say is the things of this universe, the universe itself and life itself, look exactly the same. So forgive me if this sounds a bit simplistic, but if they look the same, maybe they are the same. Right, that's not a totally radical idea. And again, just to re-emphasize the point, you look at something like this car, and you might know something of the mechanisms of a car. You might know how the wheels need to be shaped. You might know about the internal combustion engine. You might know lots of interesting detail, the streamlining, and you know the underlying purpose. Apparently, these things get you from A to B with your dog and your picnic hamper. They're remarkably good. And again, you can go into layers of purpose, like the car company that want to give you a good vehicle that will work so that you will buy more good. So we're very good at this, seeing purpose, seeing planning, seeing engineering, and understanding that is the work of intelligence. Like, again, you go to Mars and you find one of those, you're not going to say that got there by chance. You're going to say it was built by someone, presumably a Martian. So I've made this point, but it's so key. If the universe and if the life in the universe and all the machinery of the universe and all the wonderful things we're going to look at look like they are designed, maybe they are. Like, Could we just maybe have that thought? Now, some of us will be already on this page, but the world out there is not on this page, because the idea that's been given across is that physics can auto-explain the auto-generation of absolutely everything, right from the beginning of the universe to now, and all of life in all its fascinating incredibleness. It's just, we've got some equations, and look, this is what happened, biff, baff, boff. And it's wrong, it's philosophically wrong. Physics can't do that. The best physics can do is tell you how the car works. And the equivalent is, we can look at how the universe works. It's called the laws of physics. And we can look at the mechanisms of life. We're still trying to unpick them. They're so complicated. The engineering is so off the chart good. There are a lot of pictures coming, so don't worry. This is a bit chat heavy. We're going to the picture land, all right? So this is where we're going. Oh, and I should say as well, a lot of the things in the current media automatically would never refer to God. It's not our culture. So we get a view that's actually very secular, very atheistic. And of course, the demands for atheism are really high, actually, because you've got to believe that all of the things in the universe essentially could make themselves. Like, however complicated, however wonderful, you've got to believe that it's all made itself, no intelligent input, including the laws of physics, which are quite a big deal. So let's move on. And again, there is not really a battle between science and God, science and religion. There isn't. But the trouble is that some scientists will make it that way, quite deliberately. So when Richard Dawkins, very famous, wrote about the selfish gene, the general gist of it is that all biology is genes, DNA, basically expressing itself for the next generation and fighting to survive, and that's it. It's very grim, it's very brutal. It's just a mechanism, and that's it. That's like the fundamental meaning of everything. Take issue with that. And a similar theme, the idea that things look designed like a watch, but evolution's so good it can do it with its eyes shut. It's blind, right? It just randomly assembles stuff and makes incredible things. Well, no, mathematically that's really dodgy, and I'm going to show you some of that. It's appallingly bad, actually. We're going to look at that. And then this book, this made me laugh a lot, because again, the maths is just wrong. All right, that I've read books by people that are much better at maths than this guy, and it's just wrong. His view in Climbing Mount Improbable was that if you evolve something in small stages at a time, you can make nice little happy random jumps up the mountain until you get to the pinnacle, which is life as we see it. But the trouble is, the little jumps are too big. Your little frog can't make it because the probabilities are so staggeringly bad for the beginning of life to occur, and then for it to get to where it is now, that it's just, to me, it's nonsense. I look at it and I think, how can an intelligent person believe this? And it breaks my heart, because it's consequential. People build their lives on the belief that they're just right primeval soup that got lucky. But how do you have a sense of worth if you're just an advanced version of this that has no reason to be here? Like, and I haven't got time for it, but what's your foundation for ethics, for example? If everybody's just an advanced Lego set, then what difference does it matter if somebody lives or dies, is happy or sad? It's all just like chemistry and Lego. Like, I take issue with that. And then, of course, this is the point. So in more recent times, a few years ago now, he escalates it to the next level, which is he's so proud of his theory and the sort of standard biological model in some sense, that he thinks you can just delete God, and that anybody who respects and believes in God is deluded. Well, that's quite rude. I better press on. I did delete that one, that's fine. I'm going to delete this one. Excuse me skipping a few slides. It's a very fat PowerPoint, and if I've said some stuff, I'm just going to move on. Let's do science. Woo! Let's zoom out. So this is a Hubble Space Telescope deep field image, and it's particularly cool. I'll just do that, because if you were to take a grain of sand, let's say, at arm's length and point it at the sky, the amount of sky hidden by your grain of sand, if you had a good enough telescope, would look a bit like that, like lots of little bright sparkly things just behind that little grain of sand. And they're not individual stars, they are galaxies. So you imagine how many galaxies there are. It's like grain of sand, grain of sand, grain of sand, grain of sand, grain of sand. That's a lot of galaxies, like ridiculous number. And within each galaxy, loads and loads and loads of stars. You would think, with all those stars out there, it must be really easy to make a star. And if you study it at basic level at school, it sounds quite easy. Hydrogen gas floating around comes together by gravity, and it gets hot, and then the star begins. True, but so inadequate to appreciate what a star is, like not even starting to appreciate. So let's do a little bit of nuclear fusion, shall we? Yes, they said yes. So this is the basic process that is needed to turn hydrogen into helium in the sun. There's not a test on this, but I've got to tell you just enough so you can see it's cool, all right? So these red things are protons, and you can see, and the grey things are neutrons. So if you get two protons and you manage to slam them together, it has to be quite hot for that, because they repel each other. It turns out one of the protons, as if by magic, turns into a neutron. There's a lot of this kind of stuff in physics. And then after that, if you do a few more collisions and you bolt a few other things together and a few bits rip apart, eventually that guy there is helium-4, as it happens. So the total of the whole process is 4 protons in, 1 helium-4 out. Like I say, there's no test on this. But the point is that the forces of nature are kind of in balance, in the sense that the electrical forces would push the protons apart, and the nuclear forces would pull them together. And it has to be really, really precise, because you need them to stick at some points and then fall apart at others. And that's not easy. It's this not easy. If the strong nuclear force, which is like the grabber, compared to the electromagnetic force, which would tend to pull it apart, was different by 1 part in that huge number, we wouldn't get stars at all. Like, they couldn't shine. They couldn't do nuclear fusion. They just wouldn't work. And to say what that maths really means, it means if your electromagnetic force was number 1, like that's its strength, relative strength 1, and then your strong force was that number, if you added 1 little digit to the far end, then it would be too big. And if you took 1 little bit away at the end, it would be too small. Like, that's quite precise. That's 10 to the power 16, right, as it happens, but that's only the beginning of our fun little trip. If the electromagnetic and gravitational forces were wrong, then either too much gravity, too much crush for the whole star, or too much, we're protons and we're repelling, we can't do this. If that was different, and I didn't do these calculations, professional physicists of higher grade did these calculations, so it's pretty reliable. If that was wrong by 1 part in 10 with 40 zeros after it, you wouldn't get enough stars of the right sizes. You'd either get ones that were only too big or too small. And we need both types of stars, because the heavy stars do the fusion really hot and they make bigger elements, so we can actually have all the chemistry needed for a universe. And the smaller stars have to last for a long time, so that you can have a planet going around like the sun, and the star doesn't just die on you. So that's well cool. Like, those numbers are non-trivial. Like, if you didn't know there was going to be a universe and you had to sort of burst one into existence with random properties, imagine that you got one like this. That is what they call fine-tuning. The average person does not appreciate what that means. Those are ludicrous big numbers, and we haven't finished yet. How far down the rabbit hole shall we go? Everyone loves numbers, right? Just humour me, please. So, Big Bang Theory, number 1 thing, the universe had a beginning. That is a profound thing for a believer in the Bible, because the Bible says God made everything, and it wasn't just lying around forever. It came into existence. I mean, that I could just leave it there and we'd just walk away, but let's not. And those conditions are insane, right? Everything, the whole of space-time and all the matter and all the energy in one tiny little dot that's so small you wouldn't be able to see it. Like, I can't figure that out. It's too hard. And then it expanded at a precise rate. And what do I mean by that? This is just a very short time after the Big Bang, because we think we've done enough physics to work this out. The ratio of forces, again, you've got competing things, very similar to the star idea. You've got forces like pushing the universe apart, and you've got forces keeping it together. And that had to be right to within 1 with 55 zeros after it. And like, the numbers should have already blown your mind, because they don't fit in your head. So let's come back down to earth, shall we? Yeah, okay. I'll do this one very fast because time is short. Here are 10 very cool things about our planet. Right? I know we're quite like green these days and we're like looking after the planet, and that's marvelous, and there might be another planet like Earth out there. We haven't found it yet because space is so big. But the point is, this planet is special, really special. We've already talked about how the sun is a good star for the Earth. It's very consistent in its rate of shining, and it's like steady for, we think, billions of years. That's really handy. Liquid water is very cool. It's got heavy elements that we think might have been created in previous supernovas. That's pretty cool as well. No time to do that justice today. Other details as well, like a magnetosphere. So the thing that gives us the north and south poles also shields us from incoming radiation from space. That's good, isn't it? Otherwise, it would be dangerous to live here. Let's skip on, because this is a big section and so much to say. Thank you, you're listening so kindly. Life science, one of my favorite things. I almost wish I was a biologist so I could do this better. Let's just mention again from the get-go, the idea of a design inference is much simpler than it sounds. I look at it and I think, that really looks designed. And if I understand the mechanism behind something, especially if it's a complicated mechanism, I'm probably even more going to think it was designed. And usually I can also attach some sort of purpose to it. And especially in the case of humans, right? I can look at it and think, well, they did it because they wanted to do such and such. So we look for mechanisms of things and purposes of things, and it's not silly to make that inference. It's logical sometimes. I make this little point here. What I'm going to try to do is cast doubt on the conventional neo-Darwinian model of biological evolution, because that in itself doesn't seem to me to add up. Like the maths doesn't work, and I'll try and get that across to you. But I don't know how much of evolutionary mechanisms God used. Like in my worldview, believer in God, I don't know that. I haven't got time to do that aspect justice. I'll do what I can for you. Yeah. Oh, and I should say the idea here is that believers of many religions, and Christianity in particular, have quite a spectrum of how they interpret the science. We'll mention a little bit more of it. All right, we're coming to that. The point is, though, again, if you understand even some of the mechanisms of nature, that might give you even more reason to believe in a designer behind it, because if things look complicated and tricky, they probably are. Like this point here. All right, so this is not to have a go at the man, bless him. He's caused some difficulty, I think, but very big, popular in science, apparently. And he said, as you can see on screen, that if anything formed in a living being that couldn't be made by small steps, then his theory would break down, but he could find no such case. Okay, so with all due respect, he's not a design engineer, and they didn't have access to modern biochemistry back in his time. So what we're discovering now, to my mind, strengthens the case for a designing creator. It really is incredible stuff. And I'd love to know what Darwin would think if he was still alive, because I think he was a reasonably open-minded guy. I don't know, I don't dislike him. Even scientists who've got no religious feeling whatsoever are acknowledging that Darwinism is limited, like what it could actually achieve. So, yeah. And so let's just say this, right? Most people that I've met of any faith or persuasion would accept that within a bunch of reproducing creatures like pigeons, let's say, or finches, or whatever, once you have reproducing, usually couples making babies, small changes in the DNA can occur, there's natural variation, and you might get small adaptations to the environment. I don't think anybody would want to argue against that. And similar things like bacteria, modifying with time, it's a bit of a pain. It's like why we have these antibiotic-resistant bacteria in hospitals. quite often. It needs to be said sometimes the modifications that these things undergo actually would be disadvantageous in other circumstances. So it's not all gain, but that process, as far as we know, happens. But this is the big one. Going from non-life to life is a huge input of information and technology, which I'm going to unpack only some of. And so the idea that life started and then branched out into all the different species just by itself is really not well evidenced. Like, I've put quite maybe overclaimed not evidenced. I haven't seen any evidence, maybe I haven't read far enough, but there is not a strong case for how life gets started. Like, there just really isn't. And you've got to remember as well, any kind of godless view requires that things happen automatically with no end goal, no plan, no let's get to there, shall we? So, like, when people tell this story as if like almost it's inevitable that things would evolve on their own, just know, like, survival of the fittest, a rock is very good at surviving, and so is a hydrogen gas cloud, and so is all the other things that are not actually living. Life is fragile. Like, we're going to look at pictures in a minute. The cell is needed so that the chemicals inside it don't denature, and the chemicals inside it are sophisticated and advanced, and we have no idea how the first cell came into being. And all the machinery is interdependent, and it needs each other. It's like far worse than which came first, the chicken or the egg. It's like, well, I'll show you. Yeah, okay, so the thing that we're going to target a little bit is this idea that if you get a bit of genetic change and then you get natural selection, then over time you will get this incredible increase in complicated life. But that last point's really important. They call it a paradigm because it's an idea that is so strongly held that in some circles you can't even challenge it. Like, if I was a professional biochemist, I would be risking my career potentially if I gave the talk I'm doing tonight. Like, go figure. Like, I'm slightly safer because I'm a physicist, so I'm allowed to be a bit nuts. It's not my specialist area, but in certain academic circles, if you took the view that I hold, then you could get in trouble. You might not get funding. It's the paradigm. It's the thing you're meant to believe, which is dangerous. Science is meant to be open-minded. Now, bear with, I'm sorry. This is a quick bit of chemistry. I'll have to be brief so that we don't overload. You know that, well, you may know, inside an atom there are positive things and negative things. They look a bit like that, very simple. And the simplest atom of all, hydrogen, one proton, one electron. It's a bit like the electron is in orbit, but not much. Because actually what the electron does is it obeys that differential equation, and I would have sleepless nights trying to solve it, so let's move on. Let's draw some pictures, yes. So essentially the electron dances in the atom. For example, you might have a dance like that, where the electron is kind of symmetrically arranged in its dance, or you might have these other ones where you've got interesting shapes where it more goes side to side, or I don't know, these lovely flower patterns. So given different amounts of energy, the electron can do incredibly different things. So with that kind of complexity for the simplest atom, it's amazing to me that when you start putting atoms together, they can make meaningful bonds. Like, this is what chemistry is all about. So here's a nice picture, much better, civilized. Two separate hydrogen atoms where the electrons are just around one of them or the other. Nice. Put them together, and then you get a little bit of a region in between where there's a kind of more probable to have electrons. And what that does is it means the attraction and repulsion between all these charges combined allows it to sort of stick. It's not stuck in such a way that you could never break it, but it's kind of stuck. So you will have seen models like this when you were at school, or if you're still at school. So this could be two hydrogen atoms, this could be two oxygen atoms, this could be a water molecule. And the purpose of bringing it is because as we scale up to different aspects of biochemistry, I want you to appreciate like how mad the rabbit hole really is when you go down it, right? So anyway, that kind of bonding is called covalent. They're quite strong bonds. They can be broken in different reactions, but they hold together quite tightly. But there are other bonds, which we will briefly mention, called hydrogen bonds that are easier to rip apart, and that's super useful. So let's do a bit of organic chemistry. biochemistry for, it's coming, right, let's have this one. Yeah. In certain orientations, this looks a bit like a dog, which I think is cute. You might not be seeing it, and it's quite deformed, I'm sorry about that, but anyway, the carbon atoms are the black ones, the red ones are oxygen, blue is nitrogen, white is hydrogen. There's not a test on this, don't worry. They're called amino acids because of the nitrogen with hydrogen's groups. They are vital for life chemistry, as we will see. There are 20 amino acids needed to build into protein molecules, and protein molecules are the main machines that we have in our cells. And I'm going to show you some of this in a minute. So the idea here is, for life to work, you need at least those 20 amino acids, and what you need to do with them is spectacular. So a protein is built from amino acids, and on the scale of these kind of models, it would be, I don't know, like a beach ball. And we'll see in a minute, it takes about 100 to 300 of these bolted together in a very special sequence that then folds into the shape of that. So that one's myoglobin, which apparently is good for storing oxygen in your muscles. So that's nice, isn't it? So there's a little group of atoms in there where oxygen can bind, and then this kind of spaghetti shape is showing you the kind of backbone of the protein, because as I said, it starts as a long chain molecule and then it gets all wrapped up. And this guy can work by itself. So a protein is a complicated thing, but this at least can just do its own job. So let's go, and that's another 3D representation from a computer thing, and again there's a little group where the oxygen can sit in there. Let's go to one that you will have heard of, I think, hemoglobin. I was only reading about recently how cool this is. Each chunk on there is about as complicated as myoglobin, and each of these 4 spots is where you can bind oxygen. But this one is ultra clever because the whole structure flexes, and what happens is if it's in an environment like your lungs, the blood vessels in your lungs, where it's oxygen rich, 4 oxygens will attach, and it will have a certain shape. And then if it finds itself in a place where there isn't much oxygen, like in your muscles when you're working out, you see I do a lot of that, then it will at that point flex its structure and the oxygens will pop off. So how far are you going to get through your life if you don't have an oxygen transport system that takes the oxygen from your lungs to the rest of your body? Answer, you're not going to get very far. And that is such a complex structure that the idea that it just built itself, I just can't process it. So there we are, I said that fact, but it's good to see it. So this is another protein. That one's actually called ubiquitin because you find it everywhere. It's ubiquitous, and it's apparently a tag that tells other proteins that they need to be recycled. Yeah, for real. Because of course your body has to get rid of the stuff it doesn't need anymore. But how did it know that? Do you know what I mean? What, it just got there like lucky? We reckon that the human, don't read the stuff on the right unless you really want to, the human body needs about 20,000 or more different proteins. And each protein is mathematically, staggeringly unlikely to you could claim it was impossible, but it's not quite fair to say impossible. There's always a chance, right? But I want to show you the numbers in a minute. We need about 20,000 plus different protein molecules to just be alive, like to just function. So here we go. Let's do some maths. You've got to get at least 100 of these in a correct sequence. Maybe 300 for the bigger proteins. And so you've got like 100 boxes on your chain of amino acids. And you've got to select, I'll have this one, then 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 this one, if you want to get the sequence right. So here's maths. You could have 20 to the power 100 possible protein molecules just of length 100. This is a very big number. Let me try and give you a sort of clue into it. I'm actually going to make it easier by using just ordinary dice, where you can have a number from 1 to 6. So rather than a choice of 20, we're going to have 1 to 6. And then we're going to think about what are the odds that if you add 100 dice and just for a laugh with your friend, you said, oh, I bet you £10, no, I bet you £20, that if I rolled these 100 dice, I could get all sixes. Now, your human intuition might think, well, it's hard, but like, surely someone would do it. Or what about if everybody in the world did it? What about if everybody did it in the world for like every second for the next 10 years? Surely someone would do it. Computer says no. So what we're talking about, I'll unpack that one in a minute. You've got a chance on the first dice of 1 in 6. Getting 2 sixes in a row is 1 in 36. 3 in a row is 1 in 216, check the slide. 4 in a row, 1,296. By the time you get to 100 sixes in a row, it's 6.5 times 10 to the 77, which, kind of cute and coincidental, is about the number of atoms in the observable universe. And we reckon we can see out into space a distance of 13 billion light years. So the observable universe is quite large. And so to understand the odds there, it's really simple. I go on a space voyage. I've got a brilliant starship. I can go as fast as I like faster than light. I can just go anywhere. Like, oh, I'll go that way. Boosh, off out into space. You don't watch. It's not fair. It's the game we're playing. I go out randomly to whatever place I want to go, and I choose one atom, and I write on it, my atom. And then I say to you, you got one chance. See if you can pick my atom. So off you go. In your you can borrow my spaceship, it's cool. And off you go in your super duper spaceship, and you fly out there, and you choose an atom, and you find the one I chose. Like, really? Really? You had all those atoms in every star, every planet, every gas cloud, nebula, everything out there, and you found the right one that I chose? I don't believe you. Now, why does this matter? It matters heavily because I made that game too easy, because they were 6-sided dice and there was only 100. To make proteins, you have 20-sided dice and you might need 300. And that doesn't make the maths 2 or 3 times harder. It makes it off the chart ludicrous, so that you'd have to have extreme faith to think it could happen. And we are talking about the making of one protein molecule. And it doesn't have to be all 6s, right? The protein molecule has a sequence. But if you say in advance, I need this sequence, the odds against you getting it are those odds. They are unmanageable odds, just incredibly bad. So, as it happens, people that play Dungeons and Dragons have 20-sided dice. I think they're called icosahedral. So you imagine trying to get like a 20-sided dice right for 100 to 300 rolls. You ain't going to do it. Said that. Oh, even the simplest bacteria, which arguably, if you want to believe that life made itself, would have to be sort of a start point, they need about 500 protein machines. So it's not as bad as the 20,000 we need, but it's still unbelievable odds. It's like you'd be a fool to bet that this happened. If somebody wanted you to make a bet, you wouldn't bet this. And yet everybody does. If they're not, if you don't believe in God, you just assume this is what must have happened. People don't know it's what they assume. It's so sad. Yeah. Oh, and this is where we're going next, right? Proteins are not going to make themselves by just having amino acids conveniently bumping into each other. No serious scientist can claim that. So what you need is a program. What you need is instructions. And guess what? That's what we find. DNA, I'm sure you've heard of it. It's a double helix, so it's a nice spiral. I'm afraid I didn't bring a model of this molecule. I'm so sorry. The main chains of atoms on the 2 sides are covalent bonds, which are strong, but these kind of crossing bits in the middles, oh, here we go, this is the picture, have these weaker hydrogen bonds, which are slightly easier to pull apart, so it can unzip. We're going to look at this hopefully in a video in a moment. It turns out that those groups of chemicals have 4 different types, so they've just been given the chemical names with the letters A, T, G, and C. So what we find on DNA literally looks like language. And this is just showing you that they pair up in a certain way. So again, there's no test on this at the end. You don't need to worry. But if you unzip a DNA molecule, then you can sort of read the letters and match it for the next step of what we need. So here we go. Human DNA, laughable, right? 3 billion letters. Where should we go first? I don't know. On the scale of this model, if you put all the DNA in one of your cells in a line, like really it's on chromosomes, but let's imagine it was all one molecule, it would go right round the Earth about 5 times. I did do that calculation myself because it was straightforward compared to the other ones, right? So that's how much information you've got. Can you actually imagine what that means? It means if we laid out your DNA at this scale, you would literally walk along going A, T, G, C, A, T, G, A, C, and you'd have to go 5 times around the Earth. That is the instruction set that put you where you are today. It's a big instruction set. And it codes for 3D development and electrical signals and chemical processing and somehow love and hope and, well, I haven't even got there yet. Better do a bit more biochemistry. And this is verifiable, right? You check it out. You look to see on the internet if you can find how information can self-generate. There is no law of physics that does it. And if you're just left with the laws of physics with random collision, you do not get this kind of information, and you do not get it in this quantity, right? Science can't show you anything like that. And this is one of those things where people say, oh, well, I'm sure science will get there one day. Well, actually, maybe no. Just like that mathematical improbability was huge and unmountable, like you can't. Oh, right, this is getting gnarly now, so I hope you're going to be all right. There's going to be a nice video, if you like those sort of things. Top picture is some DNA being temporarily unzipped by this guy, which is a big bunch of protein molecule, and then other bits of chemical, which are not shown here, are being co-opted in to match the actual letter sequence of the DNA to produce this thing, which is messenger RNA. And when that's done, and there's some really clever stuff like, how do you know you've done it? Like, you've got to copy the right bit, not the wrong bit. And there's ludicrous stuff there. You should watch some of these videos online. They're incredible. Anyway, the messenger RNA has to go through this guy, which is another machine. And then lots of things here going in, which you can't see on this picture, ends up with the amino acids being bolted together. And eventually we get a protein. The accuracy of the copying mechanism is superb, which is good, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to live. It's just stunning. This is a really nice 3D model picture. So there's the DNA either on the way in or on the way out, and there it is again on the way in or way out. So this is the thing that's kind of temporarily unzipping it, and then here's the little messenger RNA being built like in real time so that it can go off and do its job. But the point is, right, this is apparently just using the laws of physics and like electrical forces and such to do what can only be called, like, it's just amazing, it's marvelous. Like, if you have a basic knowledge of chemistry and then you find out that this can happen, like when I first saw this, I was stunned, I was floored by it. I just thought, wow, it's so complicated and so clever. Which is not surprising if you have a belief in God. Because of course, God would be a next level engineer, a next level mathematician, a next level designer. I mean, what other God would you want to believe in? This is, again, a nice, accurate computer model of the thing that the information goes into, and then it bolts together the polypeptide, which becomes a protein. So again, look, don't lose, sorry about the detail, don't lose the thread though. The thread is you need all of this stuff. You've got many objects, they're all really accurately built, and you need all of them to achieve the things that are going on inside the cell. So what we've got in this picture is a bit more detail. This is the thing that will become the protein, so there are the amino acids getting bolted together, but they have to be delivered like Amazon packages, and they have to be delivered in the right sequence for the lettering code. And so you have this little molecule called transfer RNA, and that guy has things bolted on at one end that can match this, and if they don't, this one won't go in there. If they have got the right one, then it will go in there. And this is theoretically just random molecules bouncing around, but they've all got a coding system. They are literally labeled packages. That's good, isn't it? So this is how your DNA builds your proteins. It's so sophisticated. Let's skip that. We won't spend long here either. This is the chart that tells you, for those 3-letter codes, what amino acid will it choose. Or you've got a stop code. Where is that? There or there. So if you send a sequence, for example, UAU, or UAG or UGA, that's a stop code so it knows to stop. And apparently this is not designed. It's a computer program. And the net result of it is so much more powerful than anything we've ever done. It's hardware and software integrated. It's nanoscale. No, it just came into existence. Unbearable. And I mentioned earlier, but wouldn't expect you to remember, if you didn't have the protective coat of a cell, the bits inside, like the proteins, would fall apart. They are not that chemically strong. But to build a cell, you need some technology. And also inside the cell, you need all the other bits and bobs. Like these will do their own different jobs. I don't understand them well enough. I haven't studied it fully enough. But I know they're complicated. And I know that without the DNA and the proteins and the available amino acids, it just doesn't work. There are literally, I don't think I've got it in the video I'm going to show you, at the nucleus there are little gateways that open and close to let the appropriate chemicals in and out in the right situation. It's quite incredible. I think I'll probably skip the video because the time is so short, but again, look at the size of these things. Oh, battery's going on the thing, there we go. That's clipped on to the right part of the DNA. If a vitamin D comes in here, it activates that, and then it sends this little guy whirling along. That's the thing we spoke of before that unzips the DNA and sends out the next molecule that's needed. Maybe I haven't got time. It's so bad, I'm so sorry. Right, let's pull this up. Yeah, good, this one.
Nucleic acid base pairs, known by the letters A, T, G, and C. Now the strands run in opposite directions, which is important when you go to copy DNA. Copying DNA is one of the first steps in cell division. Strands of DNA are being unwound and separated by the tiny blue molecular machine called helicase. Helicase literally spins as fast as a jet engine. The strand of DNA on the right has its complementary strand assembled continuously, but the other strand is more complicated because it runs the opposite direction. So it must be looped out with its complementary strand assembled in reverse, section by section. At the end of this process, you have two identical DNA molecules, each one a few centimeters long, but just a couple nanometers wide. So to prevent the DNA from becoming a tangled mess, it is wrapped around proteins called histones.
How cool is that? If you've got enough DNA to go 5 times around the equator, it'll be very hard to keep that ball of string in a orderly manner. But we've got these other structures that it's all built onto, so it doesn't just like fall apart like spaghetti. That's handy, isn't it? So which came first, the DNA or the histones? Well, you need it all. Like, it's just layer after layer of what is sometimes called irreducible complexity. It's complex at such a level that you can't even take one ingredient out without the whole thing just dropping apart.
These nucleosomes are bundled together into a fiber known as chromatin, which is further looped and coiled to form a chromosome, one of the largest molecular structures in the world.
So the big deal about it is cells are programmed to die off naturally, and then new ones have to be made to replace them. So a cell has to become 2 cells. It's called mitosis. And for that to work, you've got to get a complete copy of all of that information set in your DNA into both cells. So you are copying like the world's biggest molecule with very, very little copying error. And the mechanics behind this are so ludicrous, I've got to show you. It's so beautiful. So this is just pictures under a microscope where you see the chromosomes separating. This make it look easy.
This footage is from a time lapse. How the chromosomes line up on the equator of the cell. The 2 new daughter cells, each one containing an identical copy of DNA. Consists of 2 sausage-shaped chromatids containing the identical copies of DNA made earlier.
Sorry.
Sophisticated molecular mechanisms inside the body, microtubules.
I've got to show you this because if you've never seen it, it's nuts. So they've color-coded the red on the left as when the DNA hasn't been completely copied, all 3 billion letters, so it's not ready. So they've just color-coded it to say, hey, look, we're not ready. And then you've got these little train tracks, and when it is ready, this happens. Oh, sorry, it's coming.
Sends out a chemical stop signal to the rest of the cell, shown here by the red molecules. Get ready to survive. It's just right, and the position and at this point, the stop signal broadcasting system is not switched off. It is this is really what it looks like. It has long legs so it can avoid obstacles and step over things.
Me too. And the sad thing is in the video, he goes on to say, I'm astounded by the clever scientists for figuring it out. I'm really excited about the hope that we have now we've discovered this to make better medicine processes. And of course, the elephant in the room is, this is astounding, far beyond what it should be for your basic premise that it made itself. It's like, that shouldn't happen, because look at all the ingredients you need now. You need roadways, you need little guys walking along. It's layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. Let's get back to the PowerPoint, because I've got better pictures coming and I'm running out of time. I knew this would happen. Come back up for me. Yes, we don't need those ones because we've seen them now. Yeah, current slide. Yeah, no, we don't need more lovely machines, and I want to change that. Thank you. Right, here we go. Yeah. No, done that. Don't need that. Oh, except for that. That's quite fun. Right, I forgot to mention information content in your DNA, if you didn't already think it was a lot. If you had 100 different ones of these, this is like a 1-volume encyclopedia, but imagine 100 different ones, that's the information in your DNA. It's not really surprising, is it? You're the best robot we've ever seen on this planet. Your brain is the best computer. You've got self-repair. You've got, you can create new versions of yourself. Like, imagine if your kid came home from school and said, Mom, Dad, I made this little car in school and it can have a baby car. Do you want to see? Or they came home and they said, I made this truck and it's really good. If the wheel falls off, it'll make another one. Or gets a bit of a dent, it will auto-correct the dent. Like, that wouldn't be a school science project, would it? It'd be like Nobel-winning stuff. And that's what life does all the time. And they tell us it made itself. Seriously, I don't have words to express how depressing that is. Let's move on. Oh yeah, this is fun too. So we sent a message out into space with the idea being that if there was an extraterrestrial alien, they would decode the message, and all we sent them was 1,679 pulses that if you arrange them, they make a picture. It's a lovely picture. Like, there's a person. Oh, this is coming undone. There we go. There's a person, and we're the third planet out from the sun, and hey, look, we've got a radio dish, and look, we know we've got DNA inside us, and a few other bits and bobs. The idea was you send the alien that message, and they know we're smart. Yeah, 1,679 pulses equals smart. But 3 billion letters of DNA not smart. It's accident. It was complete fluke. That's why I call it doublethink. How can you think there's two different things about the same thing? Right, we did that. And this one's even better. This is a great film, you should watch it, but philosophically dodgy. So she gets a message on the radio dish, and they decode it, and they find its instructions for making a machine. Like DNA, it's instructions for making machines, so it must have come from intelligent aliens. Let's build it. And then they have a big faith discussion. Who should go in the machine, and will it kill them, or will it enlighten them? And the film gets all spiritual. Because even the author of this film was an atheist, but there's undeniable spirituality leaking into his film because the Bible says God, we are made in God's image. So even when we're mistaken, we're made in God's image. Our ability to wonder, our ability to relate, our ability to experience love and joy, and we're not just a machine. That's good, isn't it? That's reassuring. Anyway, let's go on. Right, this is where we do no justice at all to the animal kingdom, and I'm sorry if you're into your animals, it's taken a long time to get here. Let's go. So, these are the sort of things that your typical bird has that are like specific. And just to highlight a few things, instincts and flight skills, it's no use having the equipment if you can't use it. So your brain needs to be wired the correct way. And it needs to get there pretty fast because you're born young and you've got to be surviving quite quickly and make it on your own. And some of the navigation abilities are just ludicrous, and we don't always even know how they do it. And if we find out in every case how a bird navigates, that's still going to tell me that it was designed, because that engineering is so incredible. And like this is, if you build a plane, you've got to be mindful of the weight, the lift from the wings, the drag, which is like the friction, thrust from the engines, tail lift, which might be up or down depending on your plane design, usually this way. And like I could spend an hour teaching you about moments and balance forces and stuff, and you need to know all that if you build a plane. But birds are correctly engineered. It's lovely. And then we thought we were really clever when we invented planes with wings that could kind of go back a bit so you could fly really fast. And that's just what birds do. Like, they just variable geometry. It's like, oh, you watch like a crow land. It's so cool. They swoop in, and then they just do air brakes. Oh. I've seen them do it, right? That's not fake. It's true, right? They glide, and it's just like air brakes. And it's just like nonchalant. And what size is their brain? Like a pea? I don't know. That's not to be rude about bird brains or anything. That's so rude. So rude. And then you've got ridiculous, like, over-engineered things that do not need to exist for any kind of survival of the fittest thing. You don't need to be a peregrine falcon. You could be a boring bird and still have a good life, I think. But the peregrine falcon dives at 200 miles an hour. It's got special nose baffles so its lungs don't explode. It knows how to hit the right part of its prey, otherwise it might break its own ankles. Don't think it's got ankles, but never mind. And then you've got this overkill beauty. Like, does the peacock have a survival advantage for having a big bush of ridiculous brightly coloured feathers? I don't think so. In fact, it makes it a target. Look, he's not going to be able to run away. I don't know if he can fly, probably not. It's just beauty. It's got iridescent scales. They look like eyes. The symmetry is gorgeous. The mathematical arrangement, like, is it just... Yeah. And these ones, Arctic terns, so they live half the year in the South Pole and the other half in the North Pole. Because why wouldn't you, right? You could go to Mexico or Spain, nice warm countries, but no, this one goes to the poles and migrates back and forth across the planet, like, because it can. If that isn't God making a statement, I don't know what is. It's like, do you want to see how I engineer things? This is what I do, but it gets better. It gets better. Monarch butterflies. Woo! So their migration cycle includes massive journeys across America and Mexico and back, and depending on the season. But a single monarch butterfly doesn't do the whole migration. So they get to a place, they die, their offspring make the next step, and it's like I'll migrate this far, then you do this bit, then you do that bit, then you do this bit. And they go back to the same stands of trees. I think it's in the Mexican mountains. The same stands of trees. And they're butterflies. They don't have like the slick wing of a bird. They're little flappy things that you would imagine would just get blown away in a puff of wind. And they navigate across half a continent. Yeah, that's lucky, isn't it? And oh yeah, because why would you fly in a straight line when you could just go... That's pretty much the pattern. It's a figure of 8. It's like treading water, but it's in air. It's really hard to tread water in air. I don't know, I've tried it. It's not successful. You fall, right? Air is not very dense. It's not very viscous. You drop. Oh, and it wouldn't be much use if your beak was so short you couldn't get like the nectar. So that's good. Wow, no time to do this properly. The gist of it is, these birds are so altruistic and intelligent and programmed, one would argue, that once they hatch their younglings. Well, first of all, the men help with the incubation. That's pretty cool. But then the males and females take it in turns to go ludicrous distances to go and feed. And in the meantime, whoever's left holding the baby literally holds the baby. You couldn't make it up, right? But they know what to do. They're a team, like synchronized. And as luck would have it, the chicks have the instinct to stay warm by huddling. And by the time the parents leave them, they're just about ready to survive on their own. Life is so fragile. It's so gorgeous. It's so wonderful. And the idea that like it's just chancing its way, I'm not with it. Yeah, great spotted woodpecker, good call in the front row. Excellent work. And these also have the right feature. Now think again, instinct point of view. If you had the instinct to hit your head on the wall but not the shock absorption, you're doomed. If you've got the shock absorption but you don't use it, well, that's just a wasted opportunity. But at least one of those was a bad thing. But it's got both. So much of this is nature. It's integrated engineering, I can't tell you. Oh yeah, and right, you just need to do this to survive, right? You build a nest that like anybody would be proud of. Like you make a home for your future partner, and it looks like that. You're a bird, and that's what you do. Incredible. Sorry, youngsters, sorry. This is a big deal actually, because biology needs this, the way the life works, and you get the impression that, yeah, because creatures reproduce, then that really makes evolution easy. Well, actually not so much, because if you don't have the two genders, you've got a problem, or the two sexes. If you don't have compatible seed cells, you're ruined. If you're not physically compatible, it doesn't work. If you don't have instinctual compatibility at the same time, fail. There's a lot of criteria for this to work, right? It's not trivial. Yeah, said that bit, let's go. Oh yeah, courtship dances. Should have brought another video. I mean, why do they need to do synchronized bird dancing before getting it on? Like, why is that necessary? It's not necessary, is it? It's art. It's beautiful, profound, stunning, moving art. Call it something else, like, really, honestly. Oh yeah, yeah. The first version of this, I used to say, so that no person should become proud. If you can mate while flying, like a Chinook helicopter, like, wow, like, impressive. Teamwork, I'm going to skip on. Honeypot ants, ludicrous. Oh yeah, how do you fancy dissolving lots of your inner body parts so that you can make a new shape? That's the cinnabar moth caterpillar, and that's the cinnabar moth. Do you need that level of tech? No, it's just art. Oh, dolphin tech, I haven't got time for that, I'm afraid. Sonars, let's move on. Oh yeah, I did learn recently that they shed their skin very rapidly and create new skin, so they've got silky smooth skin in addition to their beautiful streamlined shape. I'm just going to say that, and I'm going to move on. And spiders, right? You've got to have everything. You've got to have the will to use your spinnerets, your silk factory. You've got to know how to go from plant to build geometry. It's ludicrous. Blood clotting, next time you hurt yourself. All of those red and purple boxes are complicated chemicals that have to interact in a sequence for your blood to clot. You think about that, because if it wasn't like that, your blood might clot when you were just sitting here. That's a bad thing. Or it would just pour out of you when you cut yourself. Also an equally bad thing. But there's this clever chemical cascade that's triggered when you cut yourself, and it gets exposed to the air, and it goes jing, 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 jing. Like, imagine if you'd only evolved enough to have blood that didn't do that. That would be quite upsetting, wouldn't it? I haven't got time for these, but just maybe that one. The bombardier beetle mixes up a cocktail of, I think it's hydroquinone and something else, and then fires it out explosively to get rid of, like, predators. Fortunately, it's equipped with the right stuff so it doesn't blow itself up. That's good, isn't it? Could you imagine if you literally... wow. It's just... yeah, it's just, exactly. And then you've got these, well, too much to say there. Let's go on. Oh, man. I know I'm out of time, guys, at the back. I'm really trying to fly. I know. So as we sit here, as we live and we breathe, right, which bits of this don't you want? Like the frame, the nerves, the circulatory system, where you've got a pump that exerts exactly the right pressure to push things out to your capillaries and then back again. 4-chamber pump. The sinoatrial node is a point on the heart where a wave of electricity comes out and triggers all your heart cells to pump at the right time. That's why if it all goes wrong, we have to use a defibrillator to get you back. A speechless level of engineering just on that. Half the size of a tennis court, the internal area of your lungs. What if it got clogged up with dust? oh no, it doesn't, because there's these little hairs inside your windpipe and a kind of mucus that it sort of waves and the hairs push dust back out. Because if you let the dust cover your interior there, inside the alveoli, then you get clogged up, you can't breathe, right? You die of lack of oxygen. So that's pretty cool. And then you've got a digestive system that has pH 0 acid, I think it is. It's definitely super, super strong. And it would carve a hole through you if you didn't have a mucus-lined stomach. That's handy, isn't it? So you can drop in the fuel, and the pH 0 acid, it dismantles the fuel, which could be, let's say, steak, which is not that dissimilar. Well, let's go with chicken, not dissimilar from us, and that's the point, right? The acid could dissolve the chicken, but it could also dissolve you, but you've got a protective layer. Handy. And then you've got muscles attached at all the right points so that you can move in multiple directions, and oh my word. And then the brain, 80 to 100 billion neurons in a network that have interconnections up to 1,000 to 10,000 neurons from connections from each neuron to neuron. It's a parallel processor. It's a mixture of analog and digital technology. It's so far off the chart beyond what we have made that all I can say is God did this. I don't think that's too big a reach. I might not have seen God, but then you didn't see me put these things here tonight. You didn't see me build that Lego car. You didn't see the manufacturer of this do their job, but you know they were there. Now, what other explanation do you want? And what we're talking about is off the chart better than any of that. Oh, and don't forget, it all has to start with a sperm cell and an egg cell, and they make one identity. It becomes one simple, well, it's not simple cell, one cell on its own, then it has to divide, then divide, then divide. And at a certain point, those cells have to differentiate. And there has to be a system for saying which end of it is the top and the bottom, which end of it is the left and the right, which is the front and the back. Who's going to be bone? Oh, I'm going to be bone. Who's going to be blood vessel? Who's going to be blood? Can you imagine? Like, we can't make a single living cell in the lab, even though we know a lot of stuff. We can't handcraft it from chemicals. We can't make one cell. And we've got us. If tomorrow a big tech company presented you with one of the people in this room and said, here's my new robot, you'd say, no, it's not a robot, it's a person. Because it's so far beyond. Right. Yeah, I am near there, sir. This is my very caring pastor who knows when I've got to stop. Oh yeah, here we go. Last finale. Promise. I nearly got through it. This is like a world record. So here is the world of doublethink that you exist in. I'm sorry to break it to you. On the left, a masterpiece by Leonardo da Vinci. Don't you dare say that's just oil marks on a two-dimensional canvas. How dare you? That's the Mona Lisa. That, however, is the result of random processes over a period of time. Even though that one's three-dimensional and intelligent and can function and do stuff. This is where it gets really funny. I have no idea who the artist is, but I reckon this artist was better. And again, Van Gogh with a picture of some sunflowers, a masterpiece, in inverted commas, and then actual sunflowers. And then, I love this photo for the cheeky smile, right? So, atheistic worldview, what do you define as a person? Like, that's presumably just a very complex biological machine, even though it's grinning and it's got a sense of humor. And we all know what a person is, right? So how dare they? How dare they say that I'm a machine? And like, how do you talk about ethics and morality and stuff like that if actually we're just machines? Like, why shouldn't you just delete someone? Like, if they're just a thing. Of course they're not just a thing. Yeah. Go, done. Right, I better stop. Yeah, I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much, Ben. Hello, my name is Ruben. I'm the pastor here. Thank you for a fantastic presentation, which I've really enjoyed, and I've understood at least part of it. So thank you so much. And thank you to Sarah, who organised tonight. We are going to have a chance for questions and answers in a moment. Thank you all for coming tonight. Well done. Some of you have come a good distance. Thank you especially if... Oh, hello? Am I still here?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Thank you, especially if you wouldn't call yourself a Christian. And well done for coming tonight. That's fantastic. Before I step down and you can ask some questions, just to say on your way out, someone's going to give you a little package with some information, more things that you can come to if you want to investigate, not just, oh, there's a God, but who is this God? Who could he be? So we've got a course called Hope Explored you'll get on a little bookmark, which we're hoping to run in the new year. Just 3 evenings, informally, in a friendly way, with some multimedia to consider the person of Jesus Christ. And then our Christmas carol services, we hope we've got something for everybody there. Please do come along. So pick up one of those as you go out. But questions and answers. Who would like to be first, please?
I should say as well, if there are any experts in the room that want to throw in answers, that's good too. But I'll tell you if I'm in trouble and can't handle it. Yes.
Ben, thanks. That was awesome.
No, it was a pleasure.
Really, really cool. Yeah. I've got a science background. I used to work in university, and when I was working there, I sometimes had the temptation to kind of adjust my interpretation of my results to fit what I wanted. Now, I don't think there's any scientist out there who hasn't experienced that, even though we try not to. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. So
my question is that if in science we have, and in biochemistry particularly, even though I'm not a biochemist, I'm a physicist, but if in biochemistry there's been a certain amount of, we want there to not be a God.
Yeah.
And so we make that assumption, and the data to us starts to look like there isn't one.
Yeah.
See what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
We interpret our results based on what we want to be true.
Yeah, yeah.
My question is a psychology question: why don't we want there to be a God?
Yeah, I've got one. I think. Am I still good? Yeah, I think my answer to that is, and this is much more biblical theology, is that the profound scary thing is if there is a God, then I might be responsible to that God. And if the God of the Bible might require something of me, that could be scary. Now, obviously, the Christian message is one of hope and forgiveness, but also requirement to try to follow where Jesus leads fundamentally. But I can see why you might want to push that out to the side, because it would be much more convenient if I didn't have to live in a life that had respect for God. I think, to be fair to scientists, to try and say something nice about them, because why not? I think when we're describing mechanisms just in terms of what purely happens, you don't always have to invoke a design idea. It's just that the overview, when you start asking why questions and how, well, actually it is still a how question. But I think, a lot of work has been done in science without having to refer to God per se. So I think that's all right as far as it goes. But I agree with you completely that the paradigm is, let's try and not infer intelligent agency. And I think that's a bad idea, obviously. Thank you, though, for the question. Amazing.
Any other questions?
Or we should say any other points that people would make if they had given the talk, because you might have thought something.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting way to demonstrate how complex we are. Each one. My background is medicine, so I can actually relate to that. We just have to look around the room here, one single cell, and look at the diversity of people here and how did we. So it's just something to point out. But my question to you is, and this might be an unfair question, you did very early on in your talk, you touched on a series of random mutations.
Sure.
And the Bible tells us a couple of things that I wonder if you can sort of maybe elaborate on it.
Try.
One of course is how fearfully and wonderfully we are made. That is evident here in this room from your talk. The random mutations, and what about an intentional single mutation? Could that actually explain for us the creation story from?
Quite possibly. And there are.
Is that an unfair question?
No, it's a very fair question. I think that's getting at something that I only really touched on, which is to what extent would God use, if any, evolutionary mechanisms? And I obviously can't answer how much of that he did or didn't do. But there are some very interesting things that we didn't have time to touch on tonight. Like if you look at the fossil record, which is considered to be like, oh, look, here's the simple creatures and there's the more complicated ones, and over time they got more complicated. The story isn't that clean. It's not that good. And there are stages in the rock structure where you get suddenly loads of creatures that were never there before. And there's various interpretations of fossils that suggest it wasn't a very smooth, long-term, tight, gradual process. So in a sense, I don't think there's even much scope for small mutations to do very much. Actually, usually the change in information from organism to organism is quite a big and a profound change. So the simple answer is I have no idea about God's mechanism, but I admire the end result. Thank you. Oh yes, this is great.
Thank you, Ben, for that.
Pleasure.
Try not to go too deeply into this, but I'll try and give you something to go from. I want to talk a little bit about suffering, and we talked a lot tonight about how impressive nature is, how the majesty of God's kingdom and us as human beings. But can you talk a little bit about disease, genetic mutation,
Sure.
our biology that leads to those things, and death, and perhaps how original sin comes into that?
Absolutely, of course. Good. So now we're into theology time. Because you could say, with all that we've said, as you correctly pointed out, I've given the very most positive as if it was perfect. And of course, the Bible says it was, and that since then, as mankind sinned and rebelled against God, the narrative changed. And sadly, God began a judgment of the world. And that's a heavy truth, if that's true. But I think that fits well with what you might call corruption, with things decaying and genetic processes sometimes going wrong, and things like cancer. And obviously you can't give a simple or appropriate answer to suffering. Suffering is a major thing that we all experience from time to time, but the Bible says we are now in a judged world. So I don't think that weakens the design argument, but I think you need the pair of them together, because how else would, like, a fair criticism, well, not maybe a fair but a criticism that many atheists would have of what I've presented tonight is, if your God's so powerful, why is there anything wrong at all? Like what in death, as you say, is the prime example. So yeah, thank you for that. That's where we really need the theology as well as the design argument. That's awesome. Thank you.
Sorry to just quickly
Vince has one.
Just a really quick interruption. Whilst we're sitting here, if anyone wouldn't mind doing the questionnaire at the top, but we'll continue with the questions and answers as well, but there's a little bit of a feedback form will be really helpful too. Another question here.
On now. It follows on from that is that people, I think, most people's problem with God, it might be said, is that not so much seeing the magnificence of creation, but the link between that and Scripture, and the language we use and the language Scripture uses is thrown about quite loosely compared with the language you would use in a discipline of physics, for example, or any other discipline, making art, for example. May I slip in a footnote to suggest you get your images the right way around?
Oh, is it flipped?
And not dismiss art so quickly.
No, I wasn't.
Because the miracle of man's creativity is extraordinary.
Yes, agreed.
However, sorry, Ben.
No, that I apologise if that came across. That was not the intention. The intention was to say, let us recognise good art, and then let us recognise good art. I should have said it like that.
Maybe. But so
I didn't like the blue one. I'm sorry about that.
Know, the whole language, one might call it religious language, is very, very, very important to tighten up.
Sure.
So the very word judgment would, for example, would need unwrapping quite a lot.
Agree.
That's just a point to make.
Yes, 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 yes. Nick, hello.
Ben, so what came across quite strongly this evening was the reliance placed on the concept of chance by people who don't believe in God.
Sure.
So can we reduce that? Can we reduce everything you have said tonight to one probability? What is the probability that we are here by chance? How many zeros?
No, well, unless you do the standard thing of compounding mathematically independent probabilities if they are independent, but the trouble is I have no idea when generating the structure of the laws of the physics of the universe how to tackle that mathematically. But if you wanted to bolt those numbers together, you could multiply them all together and get a ludicrous number with more than 100 zeros or whatever we came to.
Maybe 1,000.
Yeah, so that's, I would, yeah. Does that help?
Because it is something that people who don't rely on God, I think increasingly, or people who don't believe in God, increasingly rely on, that it's actually just chance.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's quite a lot of feedback, isn't there?
Yeah, agree. No, I totally agree, and I think I hope I've portrayed that the odds against it just happening are very, very small. Or the odds are very big against.
And often the language of chance is used in terms of, say, answered prayer. People who fight back against evidence of answered prayer, or of supposed God incidents in one's life. And I say, that's just chance that would happen. But and they might be talking. Yeah, they might say, okay, well, that was a 1 in 100,000 thing that might have happened there, but often non-believers say that they can take that, but we're talking ludicrous numbers. We're talking absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah, I think so.
So thank you for that, Ben. That's something I take away tonight.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're approaching the end. Well, we are at the end. It's 9 o'clock now. Are there any last-minute burning questions?
Oh, yes.
I'll take this as the last one, if that's okay.
I haven't quite worked out how to phrase this, but if the paradigm is that things weren't created, and so people who are doing science are thinking that way, and if you're saying that they're thinking that way, that it doesn't make sense for them to think that way, how do you know what to trust what they do?
Yeah, big question. I don't know. I think I was interestingly having a conversation with someone earlier today, and the point was made that they thought that a certain famous figure had some really radical and wrong views on a certain area, but might be profoundly expert at something else, and that is the complexity of the human predicament, and it's a reason why we all have to have humility. Tonight I've got very overexcited, and it's very important to remember that we don't see the complete picture, but it also means when we take data from other sources, we've got to sort of take it with a pinch of salt. Like, they might be expert biochemists, but if they're forced into the often the actual science is stunning. Like, they've recently unpacked some of the working of the human spliceosome, which is hilarious. It basically looks at the RNA molecule, and the way it was described was that it's like a movie editing studio, and the bits of information haven't quite been finalized yet, and there's about 5 different directors going, I think we'll have that bit, no, we'll have this bit, no, we'll have this, and this responds dynamically to the conditions inside the cell. And so you get a movie that makes sense, but it was like real-time dynamically respliced, and it's like, what? So that science is on point. It's just that the people that publish it will have an evolutionary model, so the next thing they'll go looking for is how could that have found its way here step by step. But as I say, that the chasm between what biochemistry now knows and the actual way you could get there step by step is such a vast yawning chasm. It's what authors would call a gap in principle, not like a gap that we might solve. It's like a vast gap. It's just, and we're finding layer upon layer of technology there, just amazing. So yeah, I don't know how much you could probably trust their scientific research, but you just have to look carefully at the philosophical conclusion that they bring in with it. I think it's fair.
Thank you so much, Ben. That was really, really, really great. So that concludes the evening, but we would be really, really grateful if you could scan that QR code and give us some feedback about the evening. It'll also give you the opportunity to give us any contact details if you do want to talk to us about anything, or if you want to find out about future events, and also let us know what we could do better next time as well. Thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure having you here, and thank you so much, Ben. That was really, really interesting. Appreciate it.